Hello, and welcome to DSci 522 Workflows for Data Science, Lecture 7. In this lecture, we're going to focus on how to write your own Dockerfile. Here are the learning objectives for this lecture. So by the end of this lecture and the week's labs, you should be able to use Docker to run RStudio and Jupyter. You should be able to write your own Dockerfile from scratch. You should be able to build a Docker image from a Dockerfile on your laptop, and you should be able to list good Docker base images for your R and Python projects. I'm going to show you how to use Docker to run web apps like RStudio and Jupyter for doing your data analysis. So to keep your data science team or even just yourself organized using the same dependencies across a project or between projects, you can use Docker to run RStudio, and then later I'll show you how to use it to run Jupyter. In my work outside of MDS, I use this all the time when I collaborate with others. So currently I'm collaborating on building online courses, I'm working on a textbook, and for both of these projects, we're using a Docker image that's the same for all of the contributors. And so I'm not working inside of Jupyter or an RStudio on the ones that installed on my laptop. Instead, I'm working on a web app version of those platforms inside of Docker so that we are sure we all have the same dependencies and the same versions of these dependencies, and so that we don't get into dependency inferno, which is a very sad place to end up. So I'm going to show you now on Docker Hub where you can find some useful RStudio images for you to do your data analysis with. So when you're on Docker Hub, you have this search bar here, and there's an organization called Rocker, which I've typed in here, and if we search for Rocker, we will see a lot of images that show up here, and they've created and curated excellent images for using RStudio, and they have different levels of complexity based on what you want to do. So one that you might be interested in starting with is the Rocker Tidyverse image, and that's what we'll work with here. RStudio is a little bit lighter, and Tidyverse is built on top of RStudio. There's also geospatial ones for doing dashboards, which is the Shiny, RBase, which is like very light and doesn't include the RStudio app. It just has R and a lot of base packages. So you have many, many options. And you can see that these images are very popular. So for this Rocker RStudio image, it has over 5 million downloads. So these are widely used tools in the world. So we're going to use this Rocker Tidyverse image to run RStudio. What we can see here is information about it. We could go and look at how this thing was created by its source repository, but what we're going to do first is just copy this pull command to get it onto our laptop. So let's run this pull command now so that we can get this image on our laptop. And I had a related image to this one, and so I had several layers that already existed. So it didn't need to pull the entire thing, which is one nice feature of Docker. So right now it's just pulling the things that I don't already have, and once they're all done being pulled and extracted, then I will be able to use the image to run RStudio in a browser in a Docker container on my laptop. Okay, it looks like everything has downloaded correctly. Let's start crafting our Docker command to run RStudio in a web browser using Docker. So we start with Docker run, and we can keep our friend --rm so it doesn't clog up our computer, and we can drop the -it flag, okay? We don't need to specify interactivity for these browser ones because that command to use it interactively with the browser is already built into the image for us. One thing we do need to do if we want to interact with the files on our computer is use the -v command. So again, I'm going to mount it to the current working directory. And when you're using these web apps, there are specific locations where you need to map to be able to see your files. You can't see them everywhere within the web app. So for the RStudio ones, it's home RStudio. Okay, and then so you need to put the folder in here. So I'm going to say data analysis. And this is in the documentation for each image if they had such a requirement. Now, the next thing that I need to say is that's new for this is that this is using a web app that has authentication. I need to give it a password. So I'm going to say -e password equals And I'm just going to type MDS for now. I'm just running it locally on my computer. I'm not actually putting this into production, so it's okay to not have a very secure password. And then the final thing, new command, is -p. So we have to say what port on our computer do we want to map the app to. And so the default for RStudio is 8787. So we do 8787:8787. And finally, as always, we have to say which image do we want to run. So this is going to be Rocker, Tidyverse, and this should be all we need. So we're going to hit enter. And nothing happens, right? Well, something happened, but it seems a little weird right now. We're kind of stuck here. So what we need to do at this stage is it's actually launched the container, and it's waiting for us to open up a browser at our local host, okay? So it's basically served up a web version of RStudio on our computer's local host, and so we need to navigate there in a browser. So let's do that now. And I'm gonna navigate to http localhost:8787, okay? So the local host is where it's served up on your laptop, and then 8787 is the port that we're using. When I type enter, I'm gonna make this a little bit bigger, we're gonna be asked to sign into RStudio. The username for all of the Rocker images are RStudio, and the password is whatever you made it. So I said MDS. So I'm gonna click sign in. I'm not gonna add this to LastPass because it's not a password that I'm gonna use all the time. And now I have RStudio running inside a browser, inside Docker on my computer. And I have all of the menu items I would normally run. I can run, print hello. I can load the tidyverse because I use the tidyverse image and it has this package installed, so I should be able to do this. I have all of this functionality, and I am able to see the files and folders on my laptop that I have mapped. So this is the makefile, these are the src directory with the code, my RMD document is inside of here. This is really cool. So we could all be using the exact same version of our packages, identical, across a project, and it would make our collaboration more seamless, okay? So this is very, very cool. Now, RStudio is not the only web app that we can use. As I mentioned, we can do this with Jupyter. So let's see an example of how we could do this with Jupyter now. So now I'm going to demonstrate how we can run Jupyter inside Docker. To do this, we're going to use an image called Data Science Notebook from the Jupyter core team. So again, we start off with Docker run. And I have already previously pulled the image, so this Docker run command will just run the image on my laptop. However, if you haven't pulled the image, Docker run will first do the pull step before it will do the run step. So they kind of get baked in together. Then we're going to use --rm as always to make the image or the container ephemeral. And then we're going to have to say what port we would like the web app to use. So the Jupyter notebooks use the port 8888, not 8787. That's what RStudio uses. And then if we'd like to mount volumes, we'd use the -v flag, and I'm just going to mount it to wherever I am, the files wherever I am on the computer, which I think is in my home currently. And I'm going to map that to home Jovian work, and then we'll call this T-Timbers. So home Jovian work, what is going on here? Well, similar to the RStudio Docker container web app, there is only a specific place inside of that web app where the files, if you map them or mount them, will be exposed through the web app, and that's again for security reasons. So this is the location that you have to place things on for the Jupyter core team's data science notebook image. How do I know this? Well, I read the documentation for that Docker image, and it specifies that there. Okay, so then the next thing that we need to say is the name of the image. So this is a Jupyter, from the Jupyter core team, and it's called Data Science Notebook. All right, and we should be ready to go. Now, when we hit enter here, a couple things get printed out to us in the terminal, and then it just hangs there and it's waiting for us to do something, similar to how it did that with RStudio. Instead of going to localhost with this Docker container, what we do is instead copy and paste the bottom URL that's printed out into a browser. And then we end up inside of Jupyter. So this isn't the Jupyter that's installed on my laptop. This is the Jupyter from that Docker container. And then if I click inside work, I can see T-Timbers and all of my files and such here. So that's a brief rundown of how you can use Jupyter with Docker.